Hey guys, welcome to the channel, and my name is Bladen. I'm here to document my journey as a self-taught developer trying to get a job without a college degree. Truthfully, I'm already like really far into my journey. I probably only if I'm lucky, I hope I only have about 3 or 4 months left at most. So, I'm really towards the end of my journey, but hopefully you guys will get to see the moment that I land a job because it's been 2 years in the making now. I've been out of high school for about 2 years trying to get a job. So, I kind of want to just tell you guys a bit about myself. So, I started programming when I was 11 years old. It was like my natural passion. I saw Swordfish. I was like, wow, hacking is so cool. I got to do this. And so I began by learning stuff from like Codecademy. Like I didn't quite understand a lot of like some of the things you could just do with programming. Like I didn't understand how to really use the logic of programming to its fullest extent. But that's when I discovered Scratch and I began programming with Scratch, and like Scratch was just like chains released, like go free, do what you want, build whatever, like really quick. Like the beautiful thing about Scratch, and the reason I will always recommend Scratch to early programmers, is you are not bound by the limitations of understanding syntax, the language itself. You're basically working with pure logic, and then it gives you some fine tools for creating video games and whatnot. So I did some stuff with Scratch. I built some video games that were pretty cool. All of this was independent, by the way. I didn't have any classes or anybody to like really do this stuff with. I was just like literally raw dogging it, just playing around with it and seeing what happened. Eventually, the projects that I was building got beyond the scale of what like Scratch could handle. I was running into like computational limitations, possibly memory, but I think Scratch is pretty good about memory, so it must have just been like data types and whatnot. Yeah, so I was working with Scratch, and eventually I kind of outgrew it. And then my interest shifted from like when I was 14 up until probably about 17. I more or less focused purely on business. I started selling on Amazon. I started a power washing company. I was always selling candy out of my locker whenever I got the chance. And I did mostly that. Eventually, when I started my pressure washing company, I was around 17. I kind of got back into programming a little bit more. I needed a website for my power washing company. So I was like, okay, let me go back and relearn, the fundamentals of web development. I learned enough to throw together like a static website with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I was like, oh my God, I'm top tier. I'm going to get good at this. This is my jam. I was feeling all kinds of good about it, right? I've always had a thing for robotics. And so at like 17, maybe early 18, I was like watching Paul McWhorter and like all the Arduino tutorials that he put together. Paul McWhorter, by the way, top tier. That dude's a legend. Go follow him. Go follow his tutorials. That dude is a legend. He'll teach you everything you need to know. Yeah, so I ordered an Arduino kit. I followed all of his tutorials. And then purely by coincidence, I got lucky enough to start going to a tech school. And originally, I was actually going to that school for business. But when I got there, it was like, hey, I've been running a power washing company for 2 years. What do you think about, like, am I going to learn anything in this class? And the lady was like, probably not. Probably go to Project Lead the Way. And I was like, okay. Walk into Project Lead the Way. They got 3D printers, CNC mills, laser engravers, like basically adult Legos. Like, they've got all the good stuff. I was like, wow, this is it. And I was very fortunate to have like a terrific professor. His name was Mr. Vanderborn. Dude's an absolute legend. But yeah, basically, I just flourished in that class. I completed an unbelievable amount of projects in like two of the robotics competitions that I competed in. Well, one was a showcase, one was a competition. I won the robotics competition for sumo bots, which is where you like put two robots head to head and like try to push each other off of a platform. So that was cool. And that was like one of the moments I was like, okay, I'm pretty decent at this. And then shortly after, I went into the autonomous car challenge. There was one for the NRC in Ohio. I was basically given a crap ton of like creative freedom and a pretty large budget to make that happen. But the caveat was I had to do it in 2 months. And so in 2 months, I put like 500 hours into the challenge and built an autonomous car completely from scratch, just with an RC car frame. It was pretty crazy. Uh, but yeah, so with the success that I was seeing in that class and how like fast my growth was, I was like, yep, I got this in the bag. I don't need to go to college if I've already started a company, done this well in programming. Clearly I don't need college. I'll be able to just fly through things. And that was completely wrong. That was like, oh, reality hit me like a truck out of high school. So once I graduated, I was like, okay, I'm not going to college, but I was lucky enough to get an internship doing web development. And I took the internship. It went pretty well. I got certified as a solutions architect. I helped build this website called Cloudimate. Well, it wasn't called Cloudimate at the time. At the time, it was like an internal application for the organization. And I basically saw some potential in it as like a mainstream commercial application and took it outside of my internship with the uh, owner's permission and started building it. So once I completed my internship, I was feeling pretty good. Like I got certified as a solutions architect, which is a pretty senior cert, and I was like, okay, let me build Cloudimate as my project and see what I can do for getting into web development. And in my mind, I was like, web development's so easy. It's like child's play. It's just not gonna. I'm not gonna have a hard time at all landing a job. Kind of foreshadowing a little. Cloudimate, I took about 4 months, if I remember correctly, to build Cloudimate. And Cloudimate, what it does basically is it allows people to provision network environments, resource templates. Like you can set up, like if you wanted to copy paste a whole entire like video game server setup, like I don't know, you have like your network configured a certain way, you have certain servers, certain databases. You could put all of that into a template, which is just drag and drop, and you could provision an environment from the CLI that I built in like 2 seconds. So, like literally, like 2 seconds. Like the only limitation is really how fast you can type and how fast AWS can provision the things that you have in the template. So it was just super cool. Like it was a really cool app, and I was like, this is next level stuff. If people take even a second to look at this, they're going to be like, oh my God. And I ran into a few problems. One is that nobody takes the time to look at these things. If you think that you are going to get a job based off of like the contents of your projects, you are mistaken. People are looking at a very broad overview, and even so, like you could tell them that you built the Burj Khalifa. You could tell them that you built Facebook, that you created Microsoft, and like I don't know, they just don't care. I suppose if you have very good metrics, like obviously I didn't have metrics to back me, I suppose. Like it was supposed to be software built to operate as a business, but I didn't get a lot of users, and so I didn't have very good metrics to point to, and I still don't to this day. Oh, Cloudimate failed. I should say that. Cloudimate technically failed. Technically didn't, technically did. I shut down Cloudimate of my own volition because I realized that CloudFormation with AWS existed, like basically as soon as I finished Cloudimate. And so I was like, well, is this even worth my time anymore? Maybe I can just keep up a video and, keep the source code and people can look at that. Yeah, so I took Cloudimate down. Okay, so I built Cloudimate, and Cloudimate was a failure, but it wasn't. It had a lot of cool things. It had like Google sign-in, Google CAPTCHA, like a lot of different API services were integrated. I could do cool things in AWS. By all means, it was a really good project that just didn't have a lot of metrics to back it. Um, but I didn't graduate. I completed Cloudimate, and then I was like, okay, this is it. This is it. I got a bad A project with me. I got a certified. I'm a certified solutions architect. I ran a company in high school, and I tried to get a job that way. I put in about 300 applications, job applications, and got back 2 interviews, maybe 3, but I think one of the interviews fell through if I remember correctly. And one of the interviews was completely pointless, not even worth my time to go to. But the other one, I I failed so badly. It was like a complete. This is where the reality check really set in because at this point funds were running dry from like my power washing company. Like that was the only thing I had supporting me. Mind you, I was living with my parents, but I still had to pay insurance, which was like $200 a month. I had to pay for food, my phone bill. If I broke a phone, I had to replace it. So I still had to survive basically. Funds were running dry. I'm like 4 or 5. No, I'm 3 plus 4 is 7. So I was about 7 or 8 months out of high school at this point, just surviving off the money that I already had, and funds are running dry. So after getting rejected from this one job, it was absolutely devastating. And to talk like just vaguely about why I got rejected, basically I didn't know fundamentals, like I didn't know naming conventions as well. Like they asked me about ES6 standards, which I knew about, but I didn't know exactly what came about in ES6. Like I knew about the let const, I knew about the arrow functions, I knew about the spread operator, but like I didn't know that that was all part of the ES6 thing. And then they asked me about events, and I was like, what are events? And obviously, that was like so basic. Like if you build Cloudinate, then you know what events are. But I didn't have a name for it. And that's kind of basically one of the problems with being self-taught. Uh, so yeah, I failed that. It was absolutely devastating. In fact, failing that interview forced me to get a job pouring concrete because I couldn't get a job in tech and money was running dry, so I had nothing else that I could do. My power washing company, basically I had some tools break down, and so I shut down the company. It was both like it kind of failed but kind of didn't. Like I could have brought it back to life after having some like major equipment breakdowns, but I decided not to, and then instead I decided to pursue programming. So basically, I was out of money. I couldn't go back to power washing, and the only thing I could do was go work concrete. So for 5 months, I absolutely was just out there dogging it, man. If you've ever worked construction and you've ever worked concrete, I mean it's brutal. Like it's not for the faint of heart at all. That experience was terrible because I was so far from my dreams at that point, doing something that I absolutely hated. I was programming maybe 3 hours a day. I was working about 15 hours, 12 hours of like actual work. It was about 3 hours of driving total per day. And then I would come home and I would either work on a longboard project or I would program. And so you got to imagine when you're working 18 hours a day, sleeping for six for weeks on end without a break, it's pretty terrible. And on the weekends that I had, I was either working or I was programming. I refused to take a break because I was driven, to get to achieve my goals. Anyhow, yeah, so that was absolutely terrible. I actually had two mental breakdowns during that time, and nobody knows me obviously, but mental breakdowns are not something you'd ever expect from me. Very headstrong. Anyhow, finally I was got to like the 5 month mark. I had my second breakdown and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I've got enough money put back. Let's just say F it and let's get out of here. It was like maybe a month or two earlier than I would have liked. So me and my girlfriend, we spent a lot of time with my family for like a month, and then the last month we spent preparing to move to Austin. We chose Austin because Austin's like, a tech hub only second to Silicon Valley, and it's, much cheaper cost of living compared to California, a little bit closer to home. But yeah, we packed everything that we could into like this little Chevy Aveo that was already pretty clapped. Like if you saw it, it had like tar all over the side. I'm gonna throw up a picture because it's insane what that car looked like before it died. But we packed as much as our lifelong belongings as we could into that car, which was only half, and then we headed to Texas. But yeah, since then I took an interest in AI because I was like, AI is on the up and coming. If I can get into this and it's set and match, if I can learn faster than everybody else, and I'm gold, right? So I took the CS50 AI course from Harvard. That was a breeze. I learned some linear algebra, right? So I was trying to build a perceptron model and then eventually an SVM model, and perceptron was a breeze, right? But when I got to support vector machines, I was like, bro, what is this? Bro, they started throwing symbols at me. They started speaking an enchantment table. I swear to God, like it was insane. So I was like, okay, clearly this is something I don't know and I need to learn. So I spent a very long time watching three blue, one brown. I spent time just going through research articles, practical knowledge, obviously as well. And eventually, I was like, okay. Oh, I had 100 pages, 100 pages of notes on programming and linear algebra at this point. And I was like, okay, it's time for me to go apply this. And I was like, what's the best way for me to do this? I was like, 3D graphics engine. I was like, where should I build that? And the first thing to come to mind was Scratch, because Scratch has like some capabilities. Like I know how to work with it. It's familiar to me. But the main thing is when I was a kid and I was like building all these games and stuff, I was like, wow, these 3D games are insane. And like I look at the source code for them and it'd be like, it was all hard coded, which I know now, but like back then it looked like obviously it's just the most crazy crap I'd ever seen. So I was like, how do people do this? So I just thought to be able to build a 3D graphics engine in Scratch would just be like super cool. So I spent about a month doing that. Yes, a full month building a graphics engine in Scratch. It utilized view matrices, quaternions, which are like fourth dimensional vectors basically. Just really insane math, interpolation. I had to build support for like all the custom data structures of like nested arrays, support for like vectors, matrices, all of these different kind of data structures. It was a really fun project. It was just very brutal. Like I would never do that again because Scratch is just not built to handle it. Like Scratch is meant to build like child's games, and even like the so I was if you look now, my project is still the only project on Scratch to use view matrices or quaternions. I think matrices in general, honestly, pretty much every graphics engine on Scratch relies on hard coded information or it relies on trigonomic functions, which I don't know why you can't just purely work with trigonomic functions because it seems to do well. But it's definitely not how actual graphics engines are ran, and it might be something to do with the fact that Scratch runs on a CPU instead of a GPU, if I'm not mistaken. Because like obviously graphics processing should be done on a graphics processing unit. So I built that, and that was cool. And I did put that on my resume, but it wasn't exactly meant to be crazy. It wasn't supposed to take a month. I thought it would take like 3 days, and it took a month. So after that, I was like just browsing through stuff, learning, things that I felt that I was lacking in, and then I stumbled across Git, and I've known what Git is. I never really took the time to learn it, so I was like, okay, let me do that. So I was practicing with Git, and then eventually I was like, this is annoying and repetitive. So how can I make this faster? And so I made a extension to automated suggestions for Git commands, and I think that one's a pretty good resume builder because it shows that I know how to work with Git pretty well. At this point, I have SumoBots, I have the autonomous car, I have the solutions architect certification, I have Cloudimate, I have Harvard's course, I have the 3D graphics engine, and I have Git shortcut command thing. All under my belt, all on my resume, right? I started applying to jobs because I was basically told to by some people that like are willing to help me out here. And I actually had a pretty good turnout. Like I only got one interview, but it was out of like 30 applications, I think. So like a very good turnout rate for like what it was used to be. Like I don't know if I told you guys, but I had 300 applications. I put 300 applications on my first try and got back 2 interviews if I remember correctly. So the ratio was phenomenal on the second attempt. I got an interview from Wise, but in order to get the interview, I had to take a test. And as soon as I saw that, I was like just analyzing everything that I could. What's Wise's tech stack? What languages do they want me to work with? Basically, long story short, I practiced in Python because they told me I could do whatever language I wanted. But eventually, I found out that they used like TypeScript for their front end. So I was like, okay, let me do this in TypeScript just to blow these people away and show them I know what I'm doing. And that was a mistake. And I'm trying not to go off on too much of a tangent, but if you know anything about TypeScript, to work with TypeScript, and especially with like complex data that you would retrieve from like an API or something, you really need to have a good understanding of how that data is formatted, and you need to work in a specific way because otherwise you're going to hit circular errors. Like you're going to need to know the data structure in order to type something, but you're going to get an error because you don't know the data structure's type, and basically it's circular, and it's a circular path of destruction. And I severely underestimated how difficult, or I overestimated my ability to work with TypeScript basically. And so I didn't perform nearly as well as I was supposed to on the interview for Wise. And that was like another one of those crushing moments because my girlfriend has been working for just months to keep us afloat. I mean, she's got like probably 12 hours of work today. She left at like 6 a.m. and she's not going to be back till 7. So you got like 13 hours potentially. Like, it's terrible. She's a trooper, by the way. Like, credits to her. She's amazing. Literally, I could not do this without her. She is supporting me through all of this. And I'm going to make a video explaining why I would never do this again. And one of the reasons is because, like, you can't do this without somebody supporting you. Like, if I didn't have her, there's no way. I'd be working construction right now, and I'm working at a pace where I'm working, like, probably 10 hours a day on average, and that, like, includes the weekends. So basically, after failing that, I was like, okay, I'm weak on data structure and algorithms. As a self-taught developer, you learn practical information first, and then you learn theoretical last. And it's the opposite in college. Like in college, you go and you learn data structures and algorithms, and then you learn how to apply them practically. Me, I learned the practical information. Now I'm having to go back. And so that's kind of why I'm starting this channel, although a little bit late, is because I'm like, I'm going to have to just sit here and grind HackerRank all day. And I feel like it would be helpful for people to see somebody who struggles pretty badly with data structures and algorithms go from like a complete noob to somebody who is confident. And I want to definitely talk about like my story and my journey as a self-taught developer. Don't look at my dogs. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of this series. I hope to make it as good as possible. Have a good day.